The wail of the infant pierced the cold Montana night as Emma Edwards clutched her baby closer to her chest, her trembling fingers desperately trying to coax life back into the dying embers. The year was 1878, and the unforgiving winter had descended upon the frontier with a vengeance that made her regret every decision that had led her to this moment alone, freezing, with a hungry child and nowhere to go. "Hush now, Lily," Emma whispered, her breath visible in the frigid air. "Mama's trying." But the fire remained stubborn, refusing to ignite despite her efforts. The last match had been struck, and the wind had claimed it like it claimed everything else out here mercilessly and without remorse. Little Lily's cries grew louder, echoing across the empty plains. Emma felt tears welling in her own eyes, not from sadness, but from pure frustration. 3 days since her husband's burial, 2 days since she'd been forced from their homestead by his debtors, and now here she was, 22 years old, and facing the very real possibility that she and her daughter might not survive the night. A sound in the distance made her freeze. Hoofbeats. Emma pulled her child closer, glancing around for anything she could use as a weapon. The only thing within reach was a small cooking pot, which she gripped tightly as the rider approached. The figure that emerged from the darkness was tall, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the cold. He dismounted with the easy grace of someone who'd spent most of his life in the saddle, leading his horse toward Emma's pathetic camp. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat slightly. His voice was deep, with a gentle drawl that didn't match his imposing figure. "Heard the little one crying from half a mile back." Emma said nothing, still clutching the pot with white knuckles. The stranger's eyes traveled to her makeshift weapon, and the corner of his mouth twitched. "Don't reckon that's going to do much good against me," he said, "but I admire your spirit." He crouched down beside the dead fire, examining it with practiced eyes. From his saddlebag, he produced a small tin of tinder and a flint. Within moments, he had coaxed a small flame to life. "You'll warm again soon," he said, not to Emma but to the baby, whose cries had subsided to whimpers at the newcomer's arrival. "Both of you will." As the fire grew, it illuminated his features, a strong jaw dusted with stubble, eyes the color of a summer sky, and a scar that ran from his right temple to his cheekbone. He couldn't have been more than 25, but there was a weariness in his expression that spoke of a man who'd seen far more than his years suggested. "Isaiah Prentiss," he said, extending a hand. "Most folks call me Ike." Emma hesitated before setting down her pot. "Emma Edwards. And this is Lily. Pleased to meet you, Miss Edwards." His eyes lingered on her face for a moment too long before he turned his attention back to the fire. "Though I wish it were under better circumstances." "Mrs." Emma corrected, then immediately felt a pang of grief. "Though I suppose it's just Miss again now." Isaiah's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss." Emma was surprised by the genuine sympathy in his voice. Most men she'd encountered since Robert's death had either ignored her plight entirely or seen her as an opportunity, a young widow with a baby, desperate and vulnerable. "What brings you out here all alone, Mrs. Edwards?" Isaiah asked, feeding the fire with practiced hands. "It's a long story," Emma replied, not wanting to share the humiliating details with a stranger, no matter how kind he seemed. "Well," Isaiah said, glancing up at the star-filled sky, "it's a long night." Emma found herself telling him everything about Robert's gambling debts, about the men who'd shown up at their homestead with papers saying the property was now theirs, about how she'd been given 1 hour to gather what she could carry before they burned everything else to the ground. "I thought I could make it to my sister's place in Helena," Emma explained, bouncing Lily gently on her knee. "But I underestimated the distance and the weather." Isaiah listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he stood and walked to his horse, returning with a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "It ain't much," he said, unfolding the package to reveal jerky, hardtack, and a small jar of preserved peaches. But it's better than nothing. Emma's stomach growled loudly at the sight of food, and she blushed. Thank you, Mr. Prentiss. I'll pay back somehow. No need for that, he said, settling back on his haunches. And it's just Ike. As they ate in comfortable silence, Emma studied him more carefully. Despite his rough exterior, there was something gentle about the way he handled everything from tending the fire to breaking off tiny pieces of softened hardtack for Lily to gum. You're good with her, Emma observed. Isaiah shrugged. Had a little sister once. Long time ago. The past tense told Emma all she needed to know, and she didn't press for details. Everyone out here carried their ghosts. It was impolite to ask them to parade them in the open. Where are you headed? Emma asked instead. Nowhere particular, Isaiah replied, poking at the fire. Got work as a ranch hand down near Wolf Creek last season, but the place was sold, and the new owner brought in his own men. So you're just wandering? Isaiah smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. I prefer to think of it as being open to opportunity. For the first time in days, Emma felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. There was something reassuring about Isaiah's presence, something solid and dependable that made the vast, threatening wilderness seem less intimidating. We should get some rest, Isaiah said, glancing at Lily, who had finally fallen asleep in Emma's arms. Tomorrow's going to be a long day if we're heading to Helena. Emma blinked in surprise. We? Well, Isaiah said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I can hardly leave a woman and child alone out here, can I? Besides, he added with a wry smile, I've got nowhere better to be. That night, Emma slept better than she had since Robert's death, lulled by the crackling fire and the quiet presence of the cowboy who kept watch over their small camp. Morning brought weak sunshine and the realization that Lily had developed a fever overnight. The baby's normally rosy cheeks were flushed an alarming shade of red, and her tiny body radiated heat. She's burning up, Emma said, panic rising in her voice. She was fine last night, just hungry and cold, but now, Isaiah placed a calloused hand gently on Lily's forehead. There's a settlement about 4 hours' ride from here. They've got a doctor, or at least someone who calls himself one. Emma clutched Lily tighter. 4 hours? She needs help now. I know, Isaiah said, his voice calm but urgent. That's why we're leaving right now. Can you ride? Emma nodded. She'd grown up on a farm in Missouri before marrying Robert and moving west. Riding was second nature to her. Good, Isaiah said, already packing up their meager camp. You'll take Scout. He's steadier than that ornery mule you've got. Within minutes, they were mounted Emma on Isaiah's horse with Lily secured against her chest in a makeshift sling, and Isaiah leading both Emma's mule and Scout by their reins as he walked beside them. You're not riding? Emma asked, feeling guilty. Walking's good for a man's soul, Isaiah replied with a small smile. Besides, Scout can't carry all 3 of us, and you need to focus on keeping Lily comfortable. They traveled in tense silence, broken only by Lily's occasional whimpers and Isaiah's soft words of encouragement to the animals. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, golden grasses swaying in the morning breeze, deceptively beautiful for something so deadly. As the sun climbed higher, Emma began to worry. Lily's fever seemed to be worsening, and the baby had stopped crying a silence that terrified Emma more than the loudest screams. How much further? She asked, her voice tight with fear. Not far now, Isaiah assured her, though Emma could see the concern in his eyes. Just over that ridge. But as they crested the hill, Emma's heart sank. Instead of a settlement, all she could see was more prairie, stretching to the horizon. I don't understand, she said, fighting back tears. You said, it's there, Isaiah insisted, pointing to what looked like nothing more than a smudge in the distance. Trust me. Trust. Such a simple word, but one Emma had learned to be wary of. Robert had asked for her trust when he gambled away their savings, when he borrowed money from men who charged interest that compounded weekly, when he promised things would get better just before they got so much worse. And yet, looking at Isaiah's determined face, Emma found herself nodding.
Ido.
The settlement, when they finally reached it, could barely be called such. A handful of buildings clustered together like survivors of a storm which, in a way, they were. The Dakota Territory was unforgiving to those who sought to tame it. Isaiah led them directly to a weathered building with a faded sign proclaiming, J.B. Morgan Physician and Apothecary. The man who answered their urgent knocking was ancient, with a shock of white hair and hands gnarled by arthritis. But his eyes were sharp as he took in the situation without need for explanation. "Bring her in," he ordered, already turning back into the dimly lit interior. The next few hours were a blur for Emma. Dr. Morgan diagnosed Lily with a severe lung inflammation, common in infants exposed to harsh weather. His treatment involved steam, a foul-smelling tincture, and strict instructions to keep the baby warm and well-fed. "She's strong," the old doctor said, patting Emma's hand. "Takes after her mother, I'd wager." Isaiah had disappeared during the examination, returning later with news that he'd secured them a room at the town's only boarding house, a gesture that brought fresh tears to Emma's eyes. "You've already done so much," she protested weakly. "I can't." "You can and you will," Isaiah interrupted firmly. "At least until Lily's well enough to travel again." The boarding house was run by a widow named Mrs. Abernathy, a formidable woman with a soft spot for children. Upon seeing Lily's condition, she insisted on giving them her best room, the only one with a small stove that could be kept burning throughout the night. "Your husband can sleep in the common room with the other men," Mrs. Abernathy informed Emma, nodding toward Isaiah. Emma opened her mouth to correct her, but found herself unable to speak. The lie, unspoken but assumed, offered a protection she hadn't realized she needed. A lone woman with a child was vulnerable. A married woman traveling with her husband was respectable. Isaiah caught her eye and gave an imperceptible nod. "Thank you, madam," he said to Mrs. Abernathy. "That's mighty generous of you." Later, as Emma settled Lily into a makeshift crib fashioned from a dresser drawer padded with blankets, she tried to make sense of the strange twist her life had taken. 3 days ago, she'd been certain she and Lily would die alone on the prairie. Now they were safe, warm, with a doctor's care and the protection of a man she barely knew but somehow trusted with her life. "Why are you helping us?" Emma asked when Isaiah brought up a tray of food from the kitchen downstairs. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Isaiah considered her question as he placed the tray on a small table by the window. "My pa used to say that a man's character is measured by what he does when nobody's watching," he said finally. "Out here, most folks are too busy surviving to worry about helping others. Makes it all the more important that those who can do." "That's not really an answer," Emma pointed out. Isaiah smiled. "No, I suppose it isn't." He glanced at Lily, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. "Truth is, I don't rightly know why. Just felt like the right thing to do." Emma studied him, trying to reconcile the gentle man before her with the dangerous world they inhabited. "You're not like most men I've met out here." "I'll take that as a compliment," Isaiah said, moving toward the door. "Get some rest, Mrs. Edwards. Doctor says Lily should be better by morning, but you look like you could use some sleep yourself." As he reached for the doorknob, Emma called out, "Isaiah?" He turned, one eyebrow raised in question. "Thank you," Emma said simply. "For everything." His smile was soft, almost shy. "You're welcome, Emma." After he left, Emma sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the events of the past few days. She was still grieving Robert, not the man he'd become at the end, bitter and desperate, but the charming boy she'd fallen in love with back in Missouri. Yet here she was, allowing a stranger to pose as her husband, feeling a warmth in her chest when he smiled that had nothing to do with gratitude. "What am I doing, Lily?" she whispered to her sleeping daughter. But Lily only sighed in her sleep, offering no answers to her mother's confused heart. The next morning, Lily's fever had indeed broken, though Dr. Morgan advised them to remain in town for at least another day to ensure the baby's recovery was complete. Isaiah used the time to earn a little money doing odd jobs around the settlement, while Emma helped Mrs. Abernathy with cooking and cleaning to pay for their room. It was during dinner on their second night, as they sat in the boarding house's small dining room with the other guests, that trouble found them. The door banged open, admitting a gust of cold air and 3 rough-looking men. Emma recognized them immediately as friends of Robert's creditors' men who had watched with amused eyes as she'd been forced from her home. "Well, well," the tallest one said, his gaze landing on Emma. "Looks like the widow Edwards has found herself some new protection." Isaiah, who had been mid-conversation with a cattle driver, went still. His expression didn't change, but Emma saw his hand drop casually to his side, where she knew he kept a knife. "Evening, gentlemen," Mrs. Abernathy called from the head of the table. "If you're looking for a meal, I'm afraid you'll have to wait. My paying guests eat first." The man ignored her, his eyes fixed on Emma. "You still owe Blackwell money, woman. Your husband's debts didn't die with him." "I owed Blackwell nothing," Emma replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "He took our home, our livestock, everything we owned. The debt is paid." The man laughed, a harsh sound that made several diners shift uncomfortably. "That ain't how interest works, sweetheart. And Blackwell's a patient man, but his patience is running thin." Isaiah stood slowly, drawing all eyes to him. "The lady said the debt is paid," he said quietly. "I suggest you take her word for it and enjoy your evening elsewhere." The 3 men exchanged glances, clearly reassessing the situation. Isaiah wasn't particularly imposing in his worn denim and faded shirt, but there was something in his stance that gave them pause. "This ain't your business, Cowboy," the tall man said, but there was less conviction in his voice. "Mrs. Edwards is my business," Isaiah replied, the life falling easily from his lips. "And I don't appreciate men threatening my wife." A murmur went through the room. Emma felt her cheeks flush, both at the implication and at the protective fierceness in Isaiah's tone. The standoff might have escalated further if Mrs. Abernathy hadn't chosen that moment to intervene, her shotgun appearing as if by magic from beneath her apron. "I run a respectable establishment," she announced, leveling the weapon at the intruders. "And I don't allow debt collection, bounty hunting, or any other such nonsense under my roof. So you boys can turn around and leave the way you came, or you can explain to the sheriff why you're disturbing honest folk at their dinner." The men hesitated, clearly weighing their options. Finally, the tall one spat on the floor, earning a glare from Mrs. Abernathy, and jerked his head toward the door. "This ain't over," he warned, his eyes locking with Emma's. "Blackwell always collects what he's owed." After they left, the dining room erupted in excited chatter. Isaiah returned to his seat beside Emma, his expression troubled. "We should leave tomorrow," he said quietly. "Those men will be back, and they'll bring friends." Emma nodded, her appetite gone. "But where will we go?" "My sister's expecting me in Helena, but that's still days away, and if they're looking for us, I know a place," Isaiah interrupted. "It's not much, but it's remote. We can lay low there until it's safe to continue to Helena." "What about your plans?" Emma asked. "You said you were looking for work." Isaiah's eyes met hers, and something in their depths made her breath catch. "Some things are more important than work, Emma." Later that night, as Emma nursed Lily in the privacy of their room, she found herself torn between gratitude and guilt. Isaiah had put himself in danger for her, had claimed her as his wife, without hesitation. What did that mean? And more importantly, why did the thought make her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear? A soft knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. "It's just me," Isaiah's voice came through the wood. Wanted to check on Lily before turning in. Emma adjusted her clothing quickly. Come in. Isaiah entered, his hat in his hands, looking uncharacteristically nervous. How is she? Better, Emma said, smiling down at her daughter. The medicine Dr. Morgan gave her seems to be working wonders. Isaiah nodded, hovering awkwardly by the door. Good. That's good. A silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words. About what I said downstairs, Isaiah began at the same time Emma said, I want to thank you. They both stopped, then laughed softly. Ladies first, Isaiah said, gesturing for her to continue. Emma took a deep breath. I wanted to thank you for what you did. Pretending to be involved with me. You didn't have to do that. No, I didn't. Isaiah agreed, his blue eyes serious. But I wanted to. The simple honesty of his statement took Emma's breath away. Why? Isaiah crossed the room slowly, coming to stand before her. Because in the short time I've known you, Emma Edwards, I've seen more courage, more determination, more pure goodness than in most people I've met in my entire life. He knelt down so they were at eye level, his gaze moving from her to Lily and back again. And because when I heard your baby crying beside that dead fire, something inside me that I thought was long gone sparked back to life. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. And what was that? Hope, Isaiah said simply. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe there was something worth fighting for again. Emma searched his face, looking for any sign of deception or ulterior motive, but found only sincerity in his weathered features. I barely know you, she whispered. And I barely know you, he replied with a small smile. But out here, life's too short and too uncertain to waste time on conventions. I'm not asking for promises, Emma. Just a chance. Before she could respond, Lily stirred in her arms, blinking sleepily up at them both. To Emma's surprise, the baby reached out one tiny hand toward Isaiah, who offered his finger for her to grasp. Looks like I've got at least one Edwards woman's approval, he said, his voice gentle as Lily's small fingers wrapped around his. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She's a good judge of character. Better than her mother? Isaiah asked, a teasing light in his eyes. The jury's still out on that, Emma replied, but she was smiling too. They left the settlement at dawn the next morning, Isaiah having purchased supplies with the money he'd earned from his odd jobs. Mrs. Abernathy packed them food for the journey and refused payment, saying only that they should be good to each other. The place Isaiah had mentioned turned out to be an abandoned line shack about a day's ride from the settlement. It was crude but sturdy, with a stone fireplace and enough space for the three of them to live comfortably, if simply. It belongs to the Cross T Ranch, Isaiah explained as he lit a fire in the long, cold hearth. But they only use it during roundup. The rest of the year, it sits empty. And you know this how? Emma asked, settling Lily onto a blanket spread before the growing fire. Isaiah's expression turned wistful. I worked for the Cross T for a while after I first came out west. Best outfit I ever rode for. The owner, Old Man Thompson, was fair and honest, rare qualities in a cattle baron. What happened? Isaiah poked at the fire, not meeting her eyes. I left after his son took over. Junior had different ideas about how to run things. There was more to the story, Emma was certain, but she didn't press. They all had pasts they'd rather not revisit. The next few days fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. Isaiah hunted and chopped wood, while Emma cooked and cared for Lily. In the evenings, they sat before the fire, talking long into the night. Isaiah told her stories of his childhood in Texas, of his years drifting from ranch to ranch, of the beauty and brutality of the frontier. Emma shared memories of Missouri, of her dreams for Lily's future, of her fears about starting over. Slowly, the walls between them crumbled. Emma found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, the way his hands moved as he cleaned his rifle, the rare but transformative smile that lit his entire face, the gentleness with which he always handled Lily. And sometimes, she'd catch him watching her too, with an intensity that sent heat rushing to her cheeks. A week after they'd arrived at the line shack, a spring storm hit, bringing torrential rain that turned the prairie to mud and made travel impossible. Confined together in the small space, the tension between them grew almost unbearable. "I should check on the horses," Isaiah said after dinner, clearly looking for an excuse to escape the charged atmosphere. "In this weather?" Emma asked, raising an eyebrow. "They're fine in the lean-to. You'll catch your death." Isaiah sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emma, I know," she interrupted softly. "This is complicated." He gave a humorless laugh. That's one way of putting it. Lily had fallen asleep in her makeshift bed, a wooden crate lined with blankets, leaving the adults in a rare moment of privacy. "I still mourn him," Emma admitted, staring into the fire. "Not the man he became, but the boy I married. The one who promised me the moon and stars." Isaiah nodded. "I understand. Do you?" Emma asked, meeting his gaze. "Because sometimes I don't understand it myself. How I can grieve for him, and yet, Isaiah prompted when she fell silent. Emma took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "And yet feel this way about you." The confession hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Isaiah moved slowly, as if afraid she might bolt, until he was sitting beside her on the rough-hewn bench. "And how do you feel about me, Emma Edwards?" Instead of answering with words, Emma leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but when Isaiah's arms came around her, pulling her closer, it deepened into something that made her breath catch. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Isaiah rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you by that dead fire," he confessed. Emma laughed softly. "Even with me brandishing a cooking pot as a weapon?" "Especially then," Isaiah said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "A woman with spirit is a rare and precious thing." Their second kiss was bolder, a promise of things to come. But when Isaiah's hands began to wander, Emma pulled back reluctantly. "I want this," she assured him, seeing the question in his eyes. "But not yet. It's too soon." Isaiah nodded, taking her hands in his. "We have time," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time since Robert's death, Emma believed in a future that held more than just struggle and survival. The storm passed, but they remained at the line shack, neither willing to break the spell of their isolation. Isaiah taught Emma to shoot his rifle, insisting that every woman on the frontier should know how to defend herself. Emma showed Isaiah how to make biscuits that didn't resemble rocks, a skill he claimed would make him the envy of every bunkhouse cook from Texas to Montana. And every night, they grew closer, their kisses longer, their embraces tighter, though Emma still kept certain boundaries firm. Isaiah never pushed, never demanded, his patience as vast as the prairie surrounding them. It was during their third week at the shack that the past caught up with them. Isaiah had gone hunting at dawn, hoping to bring back rabbit for their dinner. Emma was outside, hanging laundry on a line stretched between two stunted trees, when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her first thought was that Isaiah had returned early, but as she shaded her eyes against the morning sun, her blood ran cold. 3 riders were approaching, and even at a distance, she recognized the tall silhouette of Blackwell's man. Emma ran for the cabin, snatched Lily from her crate, and grabbed Isaiah's spare pistol from the shelf where he kept it. She had just positioned herself in the corner with the best view of the door when the riders arrived. "Mrs. Edwards," a voice called from outside. "We know you're in there. Mr. Blackwell just wants to talk." Emma remained silent. Lily clutched to her chest with one arm, the pistol held steadily in her other hand. She'd never shot a man before, but for her daughter's sake, she would if necessary. "Your cowboy friend isn't here to protect you this time," Another voice taunted. Why don't you come out, and we can settle this reasonably? There was nothing reasonable about men who would hunt down a woman and child for a debt that had already been paid in full. Emma knew if she opened that door, she and Lily would never reach Helena. I'm counting to 3, the first voice called. Then we're coming in. Emma steeled herself, finger tightening on the trigger. 1. She thought of Isaiah, returning to find them gone or worse. 2. She whispered a prayer, pressing a kiss to Lily's forehead. Teacher, the word was cut off by the sharp crack of a rifle. Then another. And another. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of a horse whinnying in distress and the thud of someone hitting the ground. Emma, Isaiah's voice, frantic. Emma, are you all right? She lowered the pistol, weak with relief. We're here. We're safe. When she finally dared to open the door, she found Isaiah standing over the bodies of 2 of Blackwell's men. The third was nowhere to be seen. He ran, Isaiah said, answering her unspoken question. Riding hell for leather back the way they came. His face was grim, his rifle still clutched tightly in his hands. There was a smear of blood on his cheek, not his own. Emma realized with a lurch of her stomach. Are you hurt? She asked, scanning him for injuries. Isaiah shook his head.
No.
But we need to leave.
Now.
That survivor will bring back more men. They packed in a frenzy, taking only what they could carry on horseback. As Isaiah helped Emma mount with Lily secured to her chest, she noticed his hands were shaking. I killed men today, he said quietly. Not the first time, but I never get used to it. Never want to get used to it. Emma touched his face gently. You saved us. I put you in danger by bringing you here, Isaiah countered, his expression tormented. If I hadn't stopped that night, then Lily and I would have died beside that dead fire, Emma interrupted firmly. And instead, we're alive. Because of you. They rode hard for 2 days, avoiding settlements and keeping to the less traveled paths that Isaiah knew from his years as a cowboy. On the evening of the second day, they crested a hill, and Isaiah reined in his horse. There it is, he said, pointing to a cluster of buildings nestled in a valley below. Helena. Emma felt a strange mix of relief and regret. They had reached safety. Her sister's home was just hours away, but their journey together was ending. Unless. What will you do now? She asked, watching Isaiah's profile against the setting sun. He shrugged. Move on, I suppose. Find work somewhere Blackwell's reach doesn't extend. Or, Emma said, heart pounding, you could come with us. Isaiah turned to her, his expression guarded. To your sisters? To wherever we go next, Emma clarified. My sister's husband owns a small ranch outside Helena. He's always looking for good hands. And she swallowed hard. I'm not ready to say goodbye to you, Isaiah Prentiss. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming it from handsome to breathtaking. Are you proposing to me, Mrs. Edwards? Emma laughed, surprising herself with the lightness she felt despite everything they'd been through. Not exactly. But I am suggesting that whatever this is between us deserves a chance to grow. Properly. Without dead fires or debt collectors or line shacks in the middle of nowhere. Isaiah reached across the space between their horses, taking her free hand in his. I'd like that, he said simply. More than I can say. As they rode down into Helena, side by side with Lily babbling happily between them, Emma thought about the strange, winding path that had led her here. From desperate widow to whatever she was becoming with Isaiah, something new, something hopeful. 5 years later, Emma stood on the porch of their small but thriving ranch, watching Isaiah teach their son Thomas how to rope a post. Lily, now 6 and fiercely independent, was helping by providing a running commentary on everything her father and brother were doing wrong. More wrist paw, she called, hands on her hips in perfect imitation of her mother. Thomas, you're holding it all wrong. Isaiah caught Emma's eye over the children's heads and winked. She smiled back, one hand resting on her swollen belly where their third child was making its presence known with enthusiastic kicks. They'd built this life together, piece by piece. Isaiah's skill with horses and cattle had quickly earned him a partnership in her brother-in-law's ranch, and eventually they'd saved enough to buy their own small spread. Blackwell and his men had tried to find them once, but the community in Helena had rallied around the young family, making it clear that such trouble wasn't welcome in their town. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink, Isaiah called an end to the roping lesson and herded the children toward the house. "Hungry?" Emma asked as he climbed the porch steps. "Starving," he replied, kissing her soundly despite Lily's theatrical groans of disgust. Later, with the children asleep and the house quiet, they sat together on the porch, Isaiah's arm around Emma's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, gesturing to the life they'd built. "That night when you found us by the dead fire?" Isaiah was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "Not exactly this," he admitted. "But I knew, even then, that there was something special about you, about us." Emma smiled, remembering the frightened, desperate young widow she'd been and the stoic, gentle cowboy who'd changed everything with a simple promise: "You'll warm again soon." And she had. They both had. The cold of that long-ago night nothing but a distant memory in the warmth of the life they'd built together.